Hi everyone, welcome to the second day of TestMu conference. Hope you guys are excited about the upcoming session. I am Navya and I will be your host for this session. Before we start the session, we would like to thank all our partners for supporting us and being part of this event. With that being said, let me introduce to our next speaker. I'm delighted to introduce to Brijesh Deb. He's a principal consultant with Infosys in the Netherlands and has over 2 decades of experience in leading, managing, and coaching teams on software testing. He has been involved in testing of applications from lightweight mobile apps to large scale industrial IoT solutions. He's also the founding enabler of a global testing community called the Test Chat, which is focused on bringing the testers' voices to the forefront. He lives in the Netherlands. He's a wordsmith and loves to write and be active on social media. He has a passion for anthropology and loves to study human behavior. Today, he's going to be explaining why, even though the idea of shift left testing has become the mantra of development, successful teams adopt continuous testing practices beyond deployment as well. So let's get right into it. Over to you, Brijesh.
Thank you so much, Navya, for that introduction, and thank you, Lambertus, for this opportunity. Well, let me begin by sharing my screen. Mm, okay, so why just shift left when you want to make progress? And this is a talk that I am excited about. I am going to share a few of my thoughts, my experiences along the way. But before I do that, here is my short introduction. I'm a principal consultant with Infosys and the founding enabler of the Test Chat community, as Nabia just mentioned. I can be easily found on LinkedIn and on Twitter. And yeah, if you want to reach out to me, do connect and we can catch up. So, to get started, well, usually, people have a food for thought at the end of the presentation, but I would like to begin with a food for thought. Okay, so imagine that this is an absolutely straight road, a highway, where you can drive at speeds of, say, 150 kilometers per hour. You're allowed to drive at that speed, and you are driving in the middle lane. Okay, now keep that thought in mind and we will come back to this again towards the end of the presentation. All right, so moving on. We have been hearing lots of stories about shift left. People have been talking about shift left. But why did somebody come to the thought of shift left is something that needs to be answered. So, initially when people started thinking about product development, and we also, the traditional way of product development or the software development lifecycle that we spoke about, you know, we saw that testing came right towards the end. And that was quite often the bottleneck for us to make progress. So, somebody came up with the idea of shifting the testing towards left, which meant that they wanted very early feedback. Because earlier the testing was put right at the end of product development, we people had to wait for a really long time to get the feedback, but that was not working out. People were struggling and they wanted to get early results. They wanted to see those defects early rather than waiting for 6 months or 1 year or whatever to see those defects. So they thought, okay, let's shift the testing towards left. That gave them the opportunity to fix the errors early. And most importantly, as a result of that, they had stable code, which meant that the product was much more stable. The product was usable. The product was, to a great extent, free from the defects which would have been otherwise found towards the end of the product development life cycle. Now, having said that, let's look at some of the recommended practices of shift left. Now, please note that I'm calling them recommended practices because there are no best practices as such. There are good practices, and out of those good practices, I want to recommend some. So, when I normally go to the customers as a consultant and I talk to them and they ask me about improving their testing, so I generally make some recommendations. These are some of them. Number one, you know, involve your testers early. One way of finding out defects earlier in the product development life cycle is to involve the testers early. This is quite a straightforward thing. Okay, if you begin with your testing early, then you will find defects early. It's as simple as that. Develop the culture of failing fast. When I say that, what I mean is that you have to embrace failure. You have to understand that as you go and build the product, there will be failures, there will be bugs, but you have to embrace that culture. And that has to happen quick enough. You cannot wait till the end of the product, just before the release, getting a major bug and then shutting everything down, and that demoralizes the entire team. So, a culture needs to be built where you embrace failure fast enough. Then, most importantly, optimize your test infrastructure. When I say that, it is about having your test environment right from the word go. Quite often, teams struggle because their test environment is not stable enough. At times, when they get really close to the release, the environment seems to break down or do some things on its own, and that's where problems start. A lot of times, it is seen that defects occurring in the products are due to failures or issues with their test environment. So that is something that needs to be handled very well, and it needs to be monitored continuously so that you ensure that your test infrastructure is always optimized. You need to have continuous monitoring. When I say that, quite often I get to hear, oh, monitoring is a term which people in DevOps use. But here, what I mean is you need to look at your test environment. You need to look at your the tests that are being developed or designed. If there are any architecture changes that are happening in the product, everything needs to be monitored continuously, and the team needs to be aware of what is going on so that everybody is able to make the right changes at the right time to keep the tests going. When I say shift left, it doesn't mean, oh, you focus only on unit testing and you're done. That's not the case. Or if I say, again, shift left, it doesn't mean that, okay, you involve your testers early and you're done. No, you have to monitor the entire situation very closely and then make sure that you are, testing well. And finally, most importantly, enable and empower your developers to test. Quite often we hear in teams that unit testing was not done or did not happen. And if you dig a little deeper, then we will find and hear stories that they did not have enough time to do unit testing because they were not empowered to do so or not enabled to do so. They should be given the flexibility and the freedom to do unit testing. They need to be trusted that they are doing unit testing. And of course, when testers get involved early, one of the things that they can do is they can join hands with developers and help them build good unit tests. Yes, you might ask me, oh, how can a tester help in unit testing? It is a developer's responsibility. Well, while we say unit testing is a developer's responsibility, in the same breath we also say quality is everybody's responsibility. So if quality is everybody's responsibility, how can you just hush away the developer by saying, oh, unit testing is your responsibility and I've got no role to play. If you have a test strategy, if you have tests in your mind, if you go and talk to the developer and ask him or her as to what they are working on, then they will tell you what is going on and they will share, you know, nitty-gritties. And there you can have a good discussion and you can help them with test ideas. If you haven't experimented with that so far, I would strongly recommend you start doing that. Talk to your developers, talk to the architects. You will learn so much, they will learn so much, and your life will become easy. And that is a shift left practice. Now, I want to share something really personal here. As a consultant, when I go to my customers, my first question usually is, what is it that is not allowing you to sleep at night? And I ask them usually for their top three pain points. Some of them, in the name of top three, list out 30, but that's fine. But then, when I ask them for their top three pain points, what they say is number one is too many bugs in production. And every time there is a production bug, then there is this whole blame game, and you missed this. I didn't see this. This is not my fault. This is his or her fault, and all of this starts. And then you are not focusing on the issue that there are bugs in production. Okay. The second thing is these days the applications have become distributed in nature. They're large scale. I mean, talk about applications like Netflix, talk about applications like Amazon. They are large scale distributed applications. We have moved on from being building monolithic applications to microservices architecture, and that's where it is a pain to test them because of their nature. And the third pain point is they cannot simulate edge cases. They say, oh, you know what? We are getting too many edge cases. We are getting bugs in production, but most of them are edge cases, and we can't seem to figure out what is going on. Now, what is happening here is because there is a lot of focus on shift left, there is a tendency of people to forget about testing after the product has been deployed. When the product goes live, when the product is deployed, there is a huge party, a huge celebration. With a lot of my customers, I've seen this trend, and it is absolutely fine, in my opinion, to go ahead and celebrate. However, you can't forget about the product right after deployment. What happens is the real journey of the product begins there when the users start using it. And when they start using it and they find issues and they, you know, operate the product in the way which you have not imagined, you get those edge cases. And that's where, people struggle to find solutions. So that is the problem. Now, how to solve these is by doing the other C of CI/CD. And what is it? It is continuous testing. And in this picture, I have Dan Ashby's model of continuous testing. Thank you, Dan, if you are watching this, for giving us this thought and this idea, and helping us understand about continuous testing much better. And he's absolutely rightly said that when we talk about DevOps, when we talk about starting to plan the product and then build it and then release it and then monitor it, collect feedback, we test at every step. So why should there be a focus on testing only of the left side of the loop? Why not start looking at the right side as well? That is the question to be asked. And that is where shift right testing comes in. All this while we have been talking about shift left, shift left. But now let's also start talking about shift right, because shift left is not enough. How many of you remember this notification? It was about a week back. If you have the Airbnb app installed on your Android phones, you would have seen this notification. Now, a lot of jokes were made out of this. People criticized Airbnb, people criticized the developer. who was working on this, people started criticizing, saying, "Oh, you know what? This is being worked upon by some intern, and he doesn't know, and he's left it like this." But if you look at it from the other perspective, the good thing to know and the good thing to understand is that Airbnb is actually testing in production, which a lot of companies do not do. So, which is a good thing in my opinion. If you forget about all the things that are being thrown towards Airbnb as trash, and look at it from the positive side, somebody is doing testing in production, which means that they are concerned about collecting user feedback, which means that they want to improve their product and make it even better. And that is such a nice thing to do. Now, like I mentioned about shift left recommended practices, I'm going to talk about a few shift right recommended practices that I normally give to my customers. First advice that I give is continue doing shift left. Just because I am talking about shift right, it does not mean that you stop talking about shift left. That is the first advice that I give to my customers. Next, implement continuous monitoring and observability. People say monitoring and observability, and people have to know that these are two different things. Monitoring tells us that there is a problem. Observability tells us why is there a problem, because we are able to observe and analyze and have the continuous monitoring and observability in your production, in your product development life cycle. Encourage developers to use engineering practices such as feature toggles. You know, this is a, a thing which is very simple to implement when you are building your product, but make sure that you use that more effectively. Now, somebody may even raise a question about the Airbnb notification that somebody forgot to switch off the feature toggle, which is okay, happens, human error, but that's fine. Okay, but it is important that you use engineering practices like that. Most importantly, observe, analyze, and observe the system continuously. Keep analyzing and then take an action, because that will give you a lot of good feedback. And remember, the very basic reason why somebody thought of shift left was because they wanted feedback, they wanted early feedback, and this is one way of getting continuous feedback, and that too from your users. So that is why this is a very, very important thing to do. And most importantly, do test in production. There are a lot of tests that you can carry out in production. Focus on those. We are going to look at some of the production tests that I normally recommend to my customers. Canary tests. Now, I'm quite sure in the audience there are a lot of people who use Facebook. Now, one of the very interesting things about Facebook is the way they release their new features. They use what is known as canary releases. So, what they basically do is whenever there is a new feature that comes in or a bug that is fixed, what they do is after development, they share it with their employees and collect feedback from them. Based on the feedback, they make the corrections, they make the fixes, and they make the updates and the changes, and then they release it to 2% of production. They again get some feedback, and then they do it to 10% of production. They again get some feedback, and then they slowly, gradually go up to 100% production. This is the way of rolling out a new feature, and this is known as canary release or canary testing. The testing that is happening here is known as canary testing. Then another thing that you could do is do A/B test, which is comparing your two releases and seeing, okay, what are the changes. This is a very good way to detect the changes early before it starts impacting the users. Then do rollout tests. Why rollout tests are important is because if you look at a standard product development life cycle, uh, the features are, you know, developed based on the priority decided by the product owner. But while rolling out, there may be changes in that priority. That rollout happens based on what the customer needs, most importantly. And that may be different from the way it was prioritized while it was being built. And that is why doing rollout tests are very important, because then you know exactly what features are getting out in a particular release, and you have to test those and the impact that it is causing on the rest of the product, and so on and so forth. Then, of course, as you are going to release it in production, you will see that more and more users will start adapting or adopting your product and start using it. And that's where scalability tests come, and they become very important. So this is one more thing that you have to do. And finally, you know, inject faults in your system and do chaos testing. And chaos testing is something which was introduced, if I may use that word, by Netflix, because they wanted to see what happens when there are faults in production systems. And they started doing it. They developed a product called Chaos Monkey, which is used widely. And they started doing these kind of tests. And if you are looking at a very stable, reliable system, then this is a very important kind of test to do. And this is also highly recommended. So, having looked at all kinds of production tests, I want to go back to the thought that I left you with. The highway on which you were driving in the middle lane, where you could drive at 150 kilometers per hour. To reach your destination, if you keep driving on that lane, life becomes difficult because it is not possible, because you will have vehicles in front of you. Okay, so it is very important that you keep shifting your lane, sometimes to the left, sometimes to the right. And that is why it is very important to understand that if you want to keep making progress in your product development life cycle, then you have to find the balance between shift left and shift right. So, to summarize finally, while you are doing a lot of shift left and you're focusing on that, focus on shift right as well. And there you will see great opportunity for you to to build a wonderful product. With that, I want to thank you all for listening to me, and I am happy to take any questions there are.
Yeah, yeah, that was a great session, Brijesh. Thank you so much that for that insightful talk. We do have a couple of questions, so we can probably take them now. So the first one: what are your thoughts on shift left non-functional testing and how we can achieve that?
Sorry, lost. Okay, what are your thoughts on
Thoughts on
shift
shift
left?
left non-functional testing and how we can
Okay,
achieve that.
this is a very good question, Manish. Non-functional, whatever we are calling as non-functional, I
Function.
believe you are referring to performance and security and
Yeah.
and stuff like that. But if you observe very closely, when you're talking about the performance of a system, you are making sure that the system is functioning, and you are making sure that the system is doing what it must do very effectively. And thereby, when more and more people start using it, you want to see what is the impact that is happening, or the system is put under stress. So to call it non-functional is a bit of a misnomer, I would say. But any case, I would recommend that if you're talking about non-functional testing, let's use that term for the sake of this discussion. It is advisable and recommended to start doing your performance tests very early. Now, for example, you know that you can do the performance testing of many features at unit level itself. API tests give you a great opportunity to test the performance of products. API security is one area which is picking up. A lot of people are focusing their energy on that. And if you know that, as products are getting developed and there are new tools coming out in the market, there are partnerships happening between API testing tools and performance testing tools and API testing tools and security testing tools because people understand the importance of doing these tests very early. So, to Manish, to answer your question, yes, you must start early. You must implement you know the shift left practices, but I would recommend that you continue doing them on the right side as well and get great feedback. I hope I have answered your question, Manish.
Yeah, additional question to that. You talked about API security testing. When do you think it's important to do you want us do we have to think about it during the test design itself, or do you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So when you are building your architecture and when you're considering, okay, these are the APIs, and you are drawing your architecture and saying, okay,
Right.
so this is going to be the data flow, this is going to be my control flow, and this is how the integration of APIs is going to work.
Hmm.
You have to also consider that, if you do not think about the security aspect of it,
Right.
it leaves a hole and an entry point for somebody malicious to do some activity. That is a
Yeah.
good point for you to plan your security testing as well.
Right. Great. So let's get go to the next question. We have someone asking, what are some ways in which we can optimize test infrastructure? So I think
Okay,
the
this is
basically.
this is coming from Mahati. She is always asking wise and tough questions. Thank you, Mahati. So first thing is, when you are you know building your test environment, okay, you must try and have a setup where you could have your entire environment as code, so that you could build it up anytime, you could tear it down anytime. Number one, this is my recommendation. A lot of people invest in a lot of uh, time and money to build their infrastructure and to maintain it. So having your environment as code will help you to do it quickly. You can spin up environments as and when you want. And one of the easiest ways, or the best ways to keep it optimized, is by looking at it continuously, by monitoring it, and to understand, okay, this is the part of my environment which is taking a lot of it, because the application has a bigger dependency on a certain part. So if you want to reinforce that little part of your infrastructure, say for example, if there is a server attached somewhere there, and you want to increase the CPU power, or throughput, then that is the right time for you to do it, rather than waiting for the environment to one day crash and then you are not getting the right result. So easy way, keep looking at it, build it on the go, have it as code, are some of the recommended practices, Marty. I hope I have answered your question.
Right. Thank you, Mati, for that question. And next we have another from Muthukumar. In a project which has more developers than testers, is involving testers into unit testing, do you think it is efficient?
Good question. Good question. Okay, so yeah, this is efficiency is a very good point. And normally we see that it is quite lopsided. It
Mhm.
is you have the tester developer ratio is quite
Right.
lopsided, where
Right.
you have you know 10 developers and like
Two
one tester or
testers.
something like that,
Two. Yeah.
or two testers. It is not recommended in such situations, Muthu. It is definitely not recommended because the testers will have their plates full. Okay, and normally this is what happens. However, in agile teams where people are expected to have that cross-functional ability, where they pick up stuff and they are able to run it as it comes to them. Everybody can do everything. In that kind of a setup, this is definitely a good practice to for people to look at unit testing as well. Now, people often ask me about what is the need for a tester to know coding.
mm,
Okay, and this is where it comes handy. If you know coding, you know exactly the language in which your developer and architects are talking. Okay, which means that you
right,
get better ideas for testing the product. It is
correct,
always giving you more opportunities to interact and increase your efficiency as a tester. Okay, so that's where it helps. It also helps you in joining hands with the developer in building better unit tests. It also helps you in inviting the developers to help you during your testing. Okay, so you know, a lot of times what happens is that in a lot of organizations, when people are or when testers are thinking about a test strategy, then there is this one person who is sitting and scratching his or her head on building the test strategy.
right,
Uh, and it is quite often a siloed thing, okay,
right.
and the focus is only on that person while working on that test strategy.
That's it.
Now what happens is another thing that is quite prevalent is for people to write this huge long document called test strategy. The thing about such a document is nobody reads it. Nobody. Okay, only the person who has written it, because he has to revise and make some changes, would read it. So when you are actually wanting to or thinking about a test strategy, it is a great idea to involve the developers. It is a
Right,
great idea to involve the product owners, because everybody will then have an understanding of what the strategy is, what is in your mind. Okay, that's a
right,
good way of sharing. That is a good way. Even then, and after that, after you involve everybody, if you have actually written one, then that will make sense because people will want to read it.
mm,
People will want to see, okay, how have you incorporated their thoughts? For example,
right,
if you are thinking of identifying certain risks early and including that as a part of your test strategy, that's saying that, okay, I will do risk-based testing.
mm,
Okay. Now, okay, I will do risk-based testing in both the pre-prod and production
first. Yeah,
environment. Okay. So this is something that comes to your head. Uh, if you explain to the developers, the architects, the product owners, and the stakeholders the idea behind you thinking of risk-based testing as an approach,
right,
then you will see that they are coming up to you and saying, you know what, I am thinking that this may be a risk.
right,
So then that will give you an idea. That means that I need to test the mitigation for it, which means that I need to write or design one more test.
mm.
So that's the way thinking evolves. Good products evolve. That
Yeah,
there is a lot of camaraderie and collaboration increase. Yes, please go ahead, Navya.
I think you're absolutely right. I think it helps to basically break down the mental map of developers and help testers understand what their thought process was before writing that particular
Correct,
piece of code.
correct, correct.
And definitely, agree with that. So I hope
Muthu,
that,
that was
yeah.
Muthu, that was a very long answer. I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah, no, I think that made perfect sense, Brajesh. Thanks. We have a lot of questions though, so let's go move on to the next one.
Mhm.
Um, so next one is from Rahul. How can we incorporate shift left testing in agile effectively and efficiently?
Excellent question, Rahul. So, shift left testing in Agile. Well, Agile itself advocates for shift left.
Mm,
Okay, there is when you talk about Agile, everybody will immediately say, okay, so you're going shift left, which means if I go back to my slide, I showed the picture from Dan Ashby where
mm.
he drew
Yeah, it
the DevOps
really,
model and emphasized on where you could test. So
right,
the whole idea there, Rahul, is that very early when you start thinking about the product design, that's when, or rather the requirements as they come in. Okay, when you do your user needs analysis and user stories are being written, that's when you should start your shift left testing. Involve the testers, let them question those user stories. Okay, why do you need to question the user stories? Because you want to make sure that those stories are accurate and complete. So accuracy and completion are two aspects you want to test, right? And that is also one kind of testing. For testing, it doesn't have to be that, okay, you need a product and you need to execute something. Asking questions so that the requirement becomes more clear is also one kind of testing. Start thinking from there. Then when people move on to design, when the product is being designed and an architecture is being drawn, ask questions there. Okay, will this design help solve the customer's problem, or will it create new problems? Have we got a common understanding of what the customer's problem is a question that you need to ask. So that is where you can incorporate shift left testing in agile early, right from the word, you know, right from the time epics are written, and there testers get involved and they start with shift left. Again, Rahul, I hope I have answered your question.
Great. Thank you, Rahul, for that question. And we have another interesting question, which I think you might have addressed. So, why is that companies hesitate to use automation testing on prod? Instead, they want only a manual testing during release.
Sridevi. Because okay, so it is not, it is primarily the primary reason is not hesitation. The primary reason is nature of the test. Okay, automation by nature, you have to understand, is confirmatory. It confirms if something is working right. It does not, or rather the focus of automation is not on finding new bugs. If you look at, if you do a study within your organization or on your in your project, you will see that automation is not giving you the number of bugs any other kind of testing is giving you. And I'm not using the word manual testing because I am famous for not using it. Okay, so if you test without tools, you will get bugs. You will be able to explore more, and automation might not help you in doing that. Another thing about automation, and this may sound a little funny, but it is true that in automation, people tend to solve their own problems rather than solving the customer's problem. First of all, building the framework. That's where it starts. Okay, people put all their energy and think about how to build the framework. This is not working. The framework is not getting built right. If you focus on the problem that you need to solve, you can easily see, look around and see, oh, there are multiple frameworks already available. You could build something to reuse that. Now, that smartness is not there in a lot of companies because they want to build their own, framework.
Yeah.
And that is where the journey begins. Then the next thing comes up with automation testing. Oh, we have a bunch of manual test cases written. Let's convert those into scripts. And the funny thing about that is limiting the scope of automation. When you talk about automation, there is a lot more than you can do. And yesterday, I think Richard also mentioned about automation. You can generate test data, which is a big problem with testing. Okay, if you want to do tests, good tests in production, if your system is such that if you use one data once in one particular test, you can't use that again. That means that every time you run the test again, if you're running a regression test, every night there are say 100 regression test cases, and then imagine the amount of data that you will need for a month. How do you generate that? Use automation for that. How do you generate your test reports? Use automation for that. So just by thinking about converting some already written manual test cases into scripts, that is limiting the scope. Okay. Anyways, so that is primarily the reason why prefer people prefer, because it gives you the opportunity of exploring and finding those edge cases, the corner cases, and that's why. Sridevi, I hope I have answered your question.
Thank you, Sridevi. Are you open to take a few more questions? We have a couple
Sure,
more
sure,
minutes. Yeah.
sure.
Uh,
That was the whole idea, finishing early.
yeah. Great. So we have Kashif asking, does automating E2E tests count as shift left? because automating unit or integration is what folks usually talk about when they are talking about shift left testing.
Kashif, this is again a very good question. Um, I do not know if that terminology actually fits in with the case
And
of end to end. But
yeah.
yeah, because you are automating your unit level tests, which I believe should already be automated in any case,
Mm.
and integration tests, you could probably call it shift left. But uh, honestly, I wouldn't bother about the terminology there. I would focus on the results.
Right.
Okay, yeah, you are right, kind of, Kashif. Yeah, you know, unit testing, integration testing, yes. If and that too, if the company is actually focusing on unit testing, because I was listening to Soumya yesterday, Soumya Mukherjee,
Mm.
and he mentioned in his talk that it is a big reality that a lot of companies actually do not do unit testing,
Testing. Yeah.
which is absolutely true. A lot of companies, because developers just don't have the time to do unit testing. It's like, okay, we have to release this feature. How much time will you spend in testing? Just get it out of the
Yeah.
window. We'll see. Okay, when somebody gets a bug, we'll see.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Yeah. So we have next question from Kasim. If you have to put a number, how many enterprises are into shift left for the custom applications that they are developing or maintaining?
if I have to put a number, that is again a good question, Kasim. I can tell you based on my experience. So, out of the customers that I have worked with, if you're talking about only about shift left, the percentage is around 85 to 90% of the customers do that. But if you're talking about shift right, then the number is again, well below 30%. Because now people are waking up to the reality of chaos engineering, site
Right.
reliability engineering, and these practices and those production tests.
Mm-hmm.
And once they start seeing those big numbers in production bugs, that's when they realize, the sad part about testing is that testing is still an afterthought with a lot of companies.
Right.
Okay, and recently there was an article which said that 85% of the CEOs in the US believe that they can just build a product and release, and they don't need to test. Okay, I shared it on LinkedIn. If you can look up my page and look at that post, you will find that article. Thank you, Kasim, for that question.
Okay, we have a couple more. We are still getting more questions, but okay, let's take one. How to successfully implement BDD to enable shift left testing? Can it also be used for backend testing?
Okay, to successfully implement BDD to enable shift left testing. Now, the intention or the idea behind BDD is to empower you to do shift left testing. That is the basic idea. When somebody thought of behavior driven
Mm.
development, they wanted people like product owners, people like, uh, customers to be able to communicate their ideas on testing the product, on saying, oh, you know what, this feature I feel is important for me, and this is something that needs to be tested. So, if you focus on doing the right things with BDD, like for example, letting your product owners and customers write your tests rather than asking your developers and testers to do that, that I think will solve a lot of your problems, because you will get the right kind of test. They know exactly what features they're asking for, and they know exactly what they need tested. Then you can focus your energy on building the rest of the product right, because you're not having to worry about what needs to be tested and this feature and that feature. You're not worried about that. The real idea of BDD is to get the users and the product owners and people like that to be able to test, or to be able to at least write the test, right? So to implement it successfully, that is the mantra. Can it be used for backend testing? Yes, of course. it can be used for backend testing as well. But again, same formula. Okay, you have to ask your customers, your product owners, what is it that you're looking for from the backend? And if they say that, oh, it is too technical, then involve people like the architects, the developers, etc.
Sorry about that. So we can take one more question.
Sure.
Okay, let's take this. How do you consider shift left when you have CI or CD in place as well?
That's where people who understand the importance of CI/CD
CC.
will understand that they need that balance. Okay, so yeah, so shift left and shift right are in good balance when you have CI/CD in place. So Wendy, this is a good question because people will invest their time in starting early, in trying to find feedback early, get that early feedback, get as many bugs as possible early in the life cycle, by implementing unit testing, by making sure that there is good collaboration between developers and testers, and that's where it will start. But for your product to be successfully deployed and making sure that you are getting good response from your end users, that's where your CI/CD will help you. So it is a combination, and it is helping you set that balance between shift left and shift right. So that is what I have observed in my experience. Thank you, Wendy, for that question.
Thank you, guys. And I think that's all the questions we can take as of today.
If there are any other questions, you can of course reach out to me on.
Yeah, there are more questions. What we can do is we can send those questions to Brijesh, and we can get his answers and post it as a blog. Or of course, you guys can reach out to Brijesh. I guess he'll share his or his Twitter handle or social media, and you can
Or
get in
we can
touch
do
with him.
or we can do an AMA. That's
Definitely. We can definitely
just an
do a
idea.
name. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, thank you so much, Brijesh, for taking out your time and speaking to us. And thank you so much. It was very insightful. Thank you,
Thank you so
guys.
much. Thank you so much, Lambda Test, Manoj, Navya. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you to the audience. Some very good questions,
Yep.
thought provoking for me as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.